The Rights of Ireland by James Fintan Lalor. From the first number of The Irish Felon, June 24th, 1848. To found a paper like The Irish Felon for the mere purpose, in whole or in part, of making a fortune or making a farthing would be a felon's crime indeed, deserving no hero's doom, lamented death, or honored exile, but death on the scaffold, amid the scoff and scorn of the world. For years we have seen men in Ireland alternately trading on the government and trading on the country, and making money by both, and you do not imagine perhaps to what degree the public mind has been affected with a feeling of suspicion by the circumstance, a feeling deepened, extended, and justified by all we see or know of ourselves. For indeed the craving to get money, the niggard reluctance to give money, the coward fear of losing or laying out money, is the bad and coarse point that is most apparent in the character of all ranks and classes of our people, and I often fear it argues an utter absence of all heroism from our national temperament, and of all the romantic passions, whether public or private. In other countries men marry for love. In Ireland they marry for money. Elsewhere they serve their country for their country's thanks or their country's tears. Here they do it for their country's money. At this very time, when Ireland, to all appearance, is stripping for her last struggle on this side of ages, there are, I am convinced, many persons among the middle classes who refuse to fall into the national march, or countenance the national movement, merely from the hope, in most cases as vain as it is vile, of obtaining some petty government place, or from the fear of losing some beggarly employment or emolument. And I know myself in this country many a sturdy and comfortable farmer who refuses to furnish himself with a pike merely and solely because it would cost him 2 shillings. For ourselves, I say nothing of others, let us aim at better rewards than mere money rewards. Better and higher rewards has Ireland in her hands. If we succeed, we shall obtain these, and if we do not succeed, we shall deserve none. In cases like this, the greatest crime that man can commit is the crime of failure. I am convinced it has become essential to our fame and our effectiveness, to the success of our cause, and the character of our country, to keep clear and secure ourselves from the suspicion that our only object may be nothing more than a long and lucrative agitation. The Confederation pledged its members to accept no office or place of profit from an English government. That pledge was efficient perhaps for its own professed purposes, but not for others. For an agitation has places and profits of its own to bestow. Let them say of us whatever else they will. Let them call us felons, and treat us as such, but let them not, at least, have the power to call us swindlers. We may be famous, let us not become infamous. For these and other still more important reasons, needless to be stated as yet, I certainly could have wished that this journal had been established on a subscribed capital, and the effective ownership vested in a joint stock company of, say, 800 or 1,000 proprietors. What is there to hinder that this arrangement should be made even now? It would contain securities and create powers which no other could offer or pretend to. There are indeed some practical difficulties in the way, but they might easily, I think, be overcome. Whether any such arrangement be adopted or not, I believe, however, that I am fully warranted in desiring, and I think that our own true interest and honor concur in demanding, that the felon office shall not be a commercial establishment, but organized and animated as a great political association. And, for my part, I enter it with the hope and determination to make it an armed post, a fortress for freedom to be, perhaps, taken and retaken again and yet again, but never to surrender, nor stoop its flag, till that flag shall float above a liberated nation. Without agreement as to our objects, we cannot agree on the course we should follow. It is requisite the paper should have but one purpose, and the public should understand what that purpose is. Mine is not to repeal the Union, or restore 82. This is not the year 82. This is the year 48. For repeal, I never went into quote-unquote agitation, and will not go into insurrection. On that question I refuse to arm, or to act in any mode, and the country refuses. O'Connell made no mistake when he pronounced it not worth the price of 1 drop of blood, and for myself, I regret it was not left in the hands of Conciliation Hall, whose lawful property it was and is. Moral force and repeal, the means, and the purpose were just fitted to each other. Arcades ambo, balmy Arcadians both. When the means were limited, it was only proper and necessary to limit the purpose. When the means were enlarged, that purpose ought to have been enlarged also. Repeal, in its vulgar meaning, I look on as utterly impracticable by any mode of action whatever, and the Constitution of '82 was absurd, worthless, and worse than worthless. The English government will never concede or surrender to any species of moral force whatsoever, and the country peasantry will never arm and fight for it. Neither will I. If I am to stake life and fame, it must assuredly be for something better and greater, more likely to last, more likely to succeed, and better worth success. And a stronger passion, a higher purpose, a nobler and more needful enterprise is fermenting the hearts of the people. A mightier question moves Ireland today than that of merely repealing the Act of Union. Not the Constitution that Wolfe Tone died to abolish, but the Constitution that Tone died to obtain. Independence, full and absolute independence for this island and for every man within this island. Into no movement that would leave an enemy's garrison in possession of all our lands, masters of our liberties, our lives, and all our means of life and happiness. Into no such movement will a single man of the greycoats enter with an armed hand, whatever the town population may do. On a wider fighting field, with stronger positions and greater resources than are afforded by the paltry question of repeal, must we close for our final struggle with England, or sink and surrender. Ireland her own, and all therein, from the sod to the sky, the soil of Ireland for the people of Ireland, to have and hold from God alone who gave it, to have and to hold to them and their heirs forever, without suit or service, faith or fealty, rent or render to any power under heaven. From a worse bondage than the bondage of any foreign government, from a dominion more grievous and grinding than the dominion of England in its worst days, from the cruelest tyranny that ever yet held its vulture clutch on the body and soul of a country, from the robber rights and robber rule that have turned us into slaves and beggars in the land which God gave us for ours. Deliverance, O Lord, deliverance or death. Deliverance or this island a desert. This is the one prayer and terrible need and real passion of Ireland today, as it has been for ages. Now, at last, it begins to shape into defined and desperate purpose, and into it all meaner and smaller purposes must settle and merge. It might have been kept in abeyance and far away from the sight of the sun, aye, even till this old native race had been finally conquered out and extinguished, sub silentio, without noise or notice. But once propounded and proclaimed as a principle, not in the dust of remote country districts, but loudly and proudly in the tribunes of the capital, it must now be accepted and declared as the first and main article of association in the national covenant of organized defense and armed resistance, as the principle to take ground and stand and fight upon. When a greater and more ennobling enterprise is on foot, every inferior and feebler project or proceeding will soon be left in the hands of old women, of dastards, impostors, swindlers, and imbeciles. All the strength and manhood of the island, all the courage, energies, and ambition, all the passion, heroism, and chivalry, all the strong men and the strong minds, all those that make revolutions, will quickly desert it and throw themselves into the great movement, throng into the larger and loftier undertaking, and flock round the banner that flies nearest the sky. There go the young, the gallant, the gifted, and the daring, and there too go the wise. For wisdom knows that in national action littleness is more fatal than the wildest rashness, that greatness of object is essential to greatness of effort, strength, and success, that a revolution ought never to take its stand on low or narrow ground, but seize on the broadest and highest ground it can lay hands on, and that a petty enterprise seldom succeeds. Had America aimed or declared for less than independence, she would probably have failed and been a fettered slave today. Not to repeal the Union, then, but the conquest, not to disturb or dismantle the empire, but to abolish it utterly forever, not to fall back on 82, but act up to 48, not to resume or restore an old constitution, but found a new nation and raise up a free people, and strong as well as free, and secure as well as strong, based on a peasantry rooted like rocks in the soil of the land. This is my object, as I hope it is yours, and this, you may be assured, is the easier as it is the nobler and more pressing enterprise. For repeal, all the moral means at our disposal have in turns been used, abused, and abandoned. All the military means it can command will fail as utterly. Compare the two questions. Repeal would require a national organization, a central representative authority formally elected, a regular army, a regulated war of concentrated action and combined movement. On the other question, all circumstances differ, as I could easily show you. But I have gone into this portion of the subject prematurely and unawares, and here I stop, being reluctant, besides, to trespass too long on the time of Her Majesty's legal and military advisers. The principle I state, and mean to stand upon, is this, that the entire ownership of Ireland, moral and material, up to the sun and down to the center, is vested of right in the people of Ireland, that they, and none but they, are the landowners and lawmakers of this island, that all laws are null and void not made by them, and all titles to land invalid not conferred or confirmed by them, and that this full right of ownership may and ought to be asserted and enforced by any and all means which God has put in the power of man. In other, if not plainer words, I hold and maintain that the entire soil of a country belongs of right to the entire people of that country, and is the rightful property, not of any one class, but of the nation at large, in full effective possession, to let to whom they will, on whatever tenures, terms, rents, services, and conditions they will. One condition, however, being unavoidable and essential, the condition that the tenant shall bear full, true, and undivided fealty and allegiance to the nation and the laws of the nation whose land he holds, and own no allegiance whatsoever to any other prince, power, or people, or any obligation of obedience or respect to their will, orders, or laws. I hold further and firmly believe that the enjoyment by the people of this right of first ownership of the soil is essential to the vigor and vitality of all other rights, to their validity, efficacy, and value, to their secure possession and safe exercise. For let no people deceive themselves, or be deceived by the words and colors and phrases and form of a mock freedom, by constitutions and charters and articles and franchise. These things are paper and parchment, waste and worthless. Let laws and institutions say what they will. This fact will be stronger than all laws and prevail against them. The fact that those who own your lands will make your laws and command your liberties and your lives. But this is tyranny and slavery, tyranny in its widest scope and worst shape, slavery of body and soul, from the cradle to the coffin, slavery with all its horrors, and with none of its physical comforts and security, even as it is in Ireland, where the whole community is made up of tyrants, slaves, and slave drivers, a people whose lands and lives are thus in the keeping and custody of others instead of in their own, are not in a position of common safety. The Irish famine of 47 is example and proof. The corn crops were sufficient to feed the island, but the landlords would have their rents, in spite of famine and defiance of fever. They took the whole harvest and left hunger to those who raised it. Had the people of Ireland been the landlords of Ireland, not a human creature would have died of hunger, nor the failure of the potato been considered a matter of any consequence. There are, however, many landlords perhaps, and certainly not a few, not fairly chargeable with the crimes of their orders, and you may think it hard they should lose their lands. But recollect the principle I assert would make Ireland, in fact, as she is of right, mistress and queen of all those lands, that she, poor lady, had ever a soft heart and grateful disposition, and that she may, if she please, in reward of allegiance, confer new titles or confirm the old. Let us crown her a queen, and then let her do with her lands as a queen may do. In the case of any existing interest, of what nature soever, I feel assured that no question but one would need to be answered. Does the owner of that interest assent to swear allegiance to the people of Ireland and to hold in fee from the Irish nation? If he assent, he may be assured he will suffer no loss, no eventual or permanent loss, I mean. For some temporary loss he must assuredly suffer. But such loss would be incidental and inevitable to any armed insurrection whatever, no matter on what principle the right of resistance should be resorted to. If he refuses, then I say, away with him, out of this land with him, himself and all his robber rights, and all the things himself and his rights have brought into our island, blood and tears and famine and the fever that goes with famine. Between the relative merits and importance of the two rights, the people's right to the land and their right to legislation, I do not mean or wish to institute any comparison. I am far indeed from desirous to put the two rights in competition or contrast, for I consider each alike as the natural complement of the other, necessary to its theoretical completeness and practical efficacy. But considering them for a moment as distinct, I do not mean to assert this, that the land question contains, and the legislative question does not contain, the materials from which victory is manufactured, and that therefore, if we be truly in earnest and determined on success, it is on the former question, and not on the latter, we must take our stand, fling out our banner, and hurl down to England our gage of battle. Victory follows that banner alone, that and no other. This island is ours, and have it we will, if the leaders be but true to the people, and the people be true to themselves. The rights of property may be pleaded. No one has a higher respect for the real rights of property than I have, but I do not class among them the robber's right, by which the lands of this country are now held in fee from the British Crown. I acknowledge no right of property in a small class which goes to abrogate the rights of a numerous people. I acknowledge no right of property in 8,000 persons, be they noble or ignoble, which takes away all rights of property, security, independence, and existence itself from a population of 8 millions, and stands in bar to all the political rights of the island and all the social rights of its inhabitants. I acknowledge no right of property which takes the food of millions and gives them a famine, which denies to the peasant the right of a home and concedes in exchange the right of a workhouse. I deny and challenge all such rights, howsoever founded or enforced. I challenge them as founded only on the code of the brigand, and enforced only by the sanction of the hangman. Against them I assert the true and indefeasible right of property, the right of our people to live in it in comfort, security, and independence, and to live in it by their own labor on their own land, as God and nature meant them to do. Against them I shall array, if I can, all the forces that yet remain in this island, and against them I am determined to make war, to their destruction or my own. These are my principles and views. I shall have other opportunities to develop and defend them. I have some few other requisitions to make, but I choose to defer them for other reasons besides want of time and space. Our first business, before we can advance a step, is to fix our own footing and make good our position. This once done, this contest must, if possible, be brought to a speedy close.